Welcome back. This is the Elevate Your Best podcast. My name is Michael Danklefs. So today we alluded to this last week where we are going to be talking about the power of suggestion and where that plays out, what it means, and the possible positive and negative repercussions of this tool, this idea of us being able to plant a seed for a particular outcome. It can be the idea of asking a leading question. So what did you do bad yesterday? And you're all of a sudden thinking, okay, was I bad yesterday? Did I do something wrong? And sometimes it's listening to someone's tone that we actually plant that suggestion in our own mind. I know commonly in relationships, some of the things I've heard is when somebody says, we need to talk, always has this negative connotation that something bad is going to happen. And all of a sudden you start thinking in your head, so what did I do wrong now? All of that can be layered into this idea of the power of suggestion. And we've a few weeks ago talked about affirmations instead, which is a way to leverage the power of suggestion in our own benefit rather than to our detriment.
Michael, I have a question. Like you mentioned the power of suggestion and then you started talking like, what did I do wrong? And these questions. What exactly do you want to say with relating the power of suggestion and this, let's call self-judgment? Because I think that the power of suggestion is very big. It's a very strong force. And I was just wondering, what exactly were you?
So really what I'm going with this is that in some ways we can train our inner judge, is what I'm talking about. That when we are critiquing ourselves, when we're providing our own personal feedback, if you're talking about automatic negative thoughts, you talk about what Dr. Daniel Amen covers, is the power of suggestion can lead us to where we want to go, or it can distract us to where we don't want to go. This can be one of the levers that is used by something like the law of attraction, the idea of you're setting the tone for what you want. So and we also talked about this quite a bit when we talked about using your words wisely as well, is what words are you using to set yourself up? So I know the idea of when we think about a concept, it doesn't tend to be that our brain hears the don't, the not, the shouldn't. Instead, it actually hears that thing that follows after it. I don't want to fail this test. You're setting a suggestion. You're suggesting to yourself, hey, there is a really clear and overwhelming opportunity for me to fail this test. So stay away from that. And instead, you're focusing on failing the test. So the way that our subconscious mind can work around this and play with this is, let's find ways to fail the test. Let's forget the things that we needed to know. Let's actually get all anxious and blank. Let's actually second guess our answers, versus using that power of suggestion can in turn also be used with, I've got this, I've studied enough, I know this information forward and backwards. You will tend to trust then your choices on the first time that you make them because you've done the work. Now, this really helps when you've done the work already, if you've done the study, to reaffirm that you've done the work that it takes to get here. This doesn't really work if you're actually lying to yourself, because there's this other mechanism in our brain that says, nope, you are wrong. That is not true, and there's no way that'll ever be true. If I can say that I'm $1 billion man, that is not true. Me walking into a room acting like I'm $1 billion man, I'm not there yet. And instead, I'm going to look like a swaggering, arrogant jerk instead of actually being empowered and abundant and being willing to share that with the people around me so they can better themselves. So it's a matter of laying the groundwork.
I agree with that. We tend to be much more focused on the negative. We tend to be harsh with ourselves, very harsh, self-judgmental, all those things. And I understood that what you were saying is we do those things and we don't recognize how this is actually influencing our own selves and working as a self-suggestion and things like that. I think that we will cover a lot of details on this and how this process works. And yeah, it's very interesting. So continue. What exactly did you have? Were you going to say something just after that before I interrupted you? That's what I tried to ask.
I can go elsewhere. We can go with this. So,
Mhm.
as you said, that we do have a tendency when we're being unaware, when we're being unintentional, to put that suggestion in ourselves as well as in the people around us. And when it comes to ourselves, it's almost like we're re-victimizing ourselves based on something that's happened in the past. And will actually keep us in that lower level of consciousness, that victim consciousness state where the world is happening to us rather than by us or through us or as us. That when we're, even the words that we're thinking in our head have that kind of impact. And if we can retrain that to be empowering suggestions instead of disempowering suggestions, we're more likely to accomplish the goals that we're aiming to do because we've changed the beliefs we have about ourselves and our capability to get there. So we do drop into this victim state many times, and I know that I've done this many times, and it's a process to retrain, to suggest, and it's why affirmations is one way to do that kind of work. I've also heard people talk about them being proclamations or action steps. What is the next, where am I at? I am enough. Sometimes is enough to say, rather than this idea of I am never going to get there. So when you are actually applying that programming into your subconscious, when you're programming those beliefs and repeating them, where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? How do you want to be when you get there? It's a matter of choosing the ones that are going to head you in that right direction. If your goal is to be the biggest victim on the planet, continue going there. Got it. That, I know for me, that's not where I want to go. And if you're listening to this right now, being that this is the Elevate Your Best podcast, I'm guessing that you don't want to stay in that level of victimhood either. You're ready for that next step, that upgrade. You're looking for your best to get better tomorrow because of the work you're doing today.
I think it's interesting what you're saying, Michael. You spoke about affirmations and things like that. I think that there is something, some groundwork we could cover before we actually mention all the things that could help there. And why do I say that? I think that we understand when we are talking about self-suggestion, focus on the negative, but in my experience, and I am sure that you might have had some similar experience, it was a great leap of faith from being focused on the negative to just focus on the positive. It was like a huge leap of faith. Like I had to hear people speaking, I had to see examples, I had to see videos that life could be better. I had to open my entire mind to the possibility that life doesn't need to be the way I was living, and that it could then open, that there were windows, doors, passages, ways where I could go through, sometimes squeeze through, in order to reach bigger pastures. And for me, as I'm here right now, I will open for you to say your experience. But for me, it was much more of an experience of faith and just deciding that, you know what, I am gonna just try to look to see the positive things and start focusing there. And just believing that if I give importance to this, it will happen as people say, they will expand, they will be more present. I will see the value. I first put my face out there, put myself out there, and then I started to see the value. And then I understood some things that we are going to talk, like we already mentioned, symbolism and affirmation. But my idea right now was just to recognize this leap of faith that there is, and ask you, have you felt this necessity, and how did you experience? Because I don't know exactly if you had a moment of, I know that You probably had a moment of transition. I don't know how it was, but have you had the necessity to have this leap of faith yourself?
So I would say that there certainly was times whenever I've needed that leap of faith to shift into that more positive focus. So I would say over the last 8 or 10 years, I've been more accused of being the optimist, of wanting to see the best side of people, of wanting to find the best outcome. And it's been a while. I'm trying to think back on when I did not act in that way, because that's ingrained in part of who I am. And I found that whenever I'm not, like, if I fall into this place of thinking that the negative outcome, I stay there. But at this point, I've gotten to the point where my default tends to be more focused on the positive rather than a default to the negative. I'm not struggling to get there anymore. But I would say in my 20s, I would say that there probably was that time frame of that. It's a matter of looking at what the problem is. It's a matter of looking at focusing on the problem rather than trying, I use the wrong word, focusing on the solution rather than instead of focusing on the problem. So it took me a while to be aware that's what I was doing. And I think that it too came from what you mentioned of hearing it enough times that it then becomes part of who you are. And that, I think that that's where some of this concept around the power of suggestion is so important. Because yes, it is a lot about what we repeat in our heads. It's a lot about that repetition, but it's also what we're consuming from the out coming in. What are you looking at? What are you observing? What are you reading? What are you listening to? And is that empowering for you? If you are always going out of your way to see things that are against your values, it's going to have the potential to shift your values because you're exposing yourself to it on a regular basis. And there's a difference between being in a situation where you're being empathetic to somebody else's side, but you're still carrying your own values to it, and you're looking for ways to remove potentially injustice. Like I know for you with your mission of qualifying people for better opportunities, you're not saying giving money to poor people, because that would mean that you're identifying and labeling people as poor people. Instead, you're qualifying people, marginalized people, for better opportunity. And that is, the wording of that's very craftily specific, is you're not saying getting people more money, you're qualifying them for better opportunities.
Yeah. I even am thinking a lot of taking out the marginalized, because I'm realizing that I actually do qualify more people. I do help and I can help, but I really like this focus on marginalized people. I think that it's necessary to be focused on the marginalized first, because if we create a structure that qualifies marginalized people that they have access to, then the people that are not marginalized, they will easily have access to that structure. If it reaches the people that are in the hardest points to reach of society, then it's definitely going to be accessible for somebody that is middle class or something like that.
But how then do you, like we had a conversation about this on a recent Clubhouse as well, is this is really prevalent in the addiction community, is if you are saying on a regular basis, hello, my name is Michael and I'm an addict, I understand owning that that is a part of your personality from your past. But if I'm staying there, I'm not going to move forward. If I'm identifying that I'm always going to be an addict, my question to you is, at what point are you cured from that? At what point have you overcome that? That's no longer the label you use for yourself. So as soon as the person becomes non-marginalized, do you no longer qualify them for better opportunities? But I get that that's
I
privilege, and I totally get that. But at what point do they become over the level by which you serve them?
I understand. I think that is a connection with what we are talking about, self-suggestion. It is interesting because you are using the law of resonance, which is identifying with things. So if I'm on a AA meeting and I identify with, hello, my name is Bruno and I am an addict, That is something that actually, this brings something that I was planning to say to the present right now, to this moment of the conversation. So let me bring this analogy here. Hello, everybody. My name is Bruno, and I am a forgetful person. So I tend to forget a lot of things. So what have I done? I recognize that I am a forgetful person, and I created structures in order to not forget things. So for example, I do know that if I go out with a rain shield, umbrella or something like that, I don't know the proper word, but if I go out with one, when I get to the place, I will probably leave that place and forget the thing there. So what do I do is that when I go out with an umbrella and I get, let's say in the jiu-jitsu class, and I go put my umbrella in a place, what I learned to do is that I do not put it in the place where everybody should put their things in. Because if I do there, that I will forget them there. I put it in the most obvious place where when I leave the gym, I'll definitely see my umbrella there. And I promise you, Michael, I was like one day, it was raining, I went to the jiu-jitsu, and then I went to the class, and after the class, I was going out, and then I saw this umbrella on the white wall, like on the small corridor, in a pillar there, like in the corner. I was like, hey, this just looks like my umbrella. And I was like passing by it, and then I realized, oh, it's my umbrella. I left it there, so I didn't forget. I would see when I'm getting out. So I do recognize that. And here's the thing with the addicted person. It's so important for to recognize that they are addicted, because when they recognize that they are addicted, they don't neglect that shadow upon themselves, and they recognize it, and they don't go into places where they know they'll be triggered, and like they put safeguards to tell them, oh, I'm going to a spiral that it's negative, like I need to recognize the signal and move forward from this. And I do believe that's important. And in the specific case of the addicted person, I do think that they are in such a stage, Michael, where achieving a level of consciousness might be so hard, it's not inaccessible, but it might be such a long journey that they will just never gonna take, because their environment just doesn't take them to that. Like people don't invite them to that. They don't put the structure necessary for them to go there. I don't think that they can't do. I think that they can do. But yes, some people that they might have damage in their physical body depending the substance that they are addicted to. It might be even alcohol. I have two uncles that died from alcohol addiction, and they drank on the hospital. They would go to the hospital and from failure for some organ, and then they would go out and they would drink like distilled, like hard substances, hard drinks. And I think that it's a different consciousness. It's a different work than what we do. We don't do the work of just how do you cope with your shadow and keep it encased and secure to not hurt yourself and other people. We actually do the work of creating a life vision and setting the best version of yourself and just being an optimal performance to get there. It's a different type of work. I do know that you will recognize that. I know that you were just using an analogy, and I'm sorry to go so deep into that, is that I do take things too seriously.
But I'm gonna call you on that. So if I were to say instead, my name is Michael and I'm working to have a better memory, it sets a
Yes.
different tone than I'm always forgetful. It, to me, and what I know of the subconscious mind, is that will then start finding solutions to have a better memory. It's going to start calculating and setting you up to notice the things that will have a better memory. If instead I say, I am always forgetful, I am is one of the most powerful statements a human being can use. And you're focusing on the forgetful. So you're going to stay there, you're going to stuck there. It's great that you have coping strategies, because that's something that you consciously are doing. Awesome. But how do you get the other 80% of your brain working with you and for you if you're always telling it, I'm great being forgetful? It's the same thing for being an addict. If I'm going to stay stuck and say, I am forever an addict and I own that 100%, I'm always going to be that. I'm never going to overcome that barrier. And yes, I agree that we at this point are not working at that level. I'm looking at working with people who have gotten to the point now where saying, my name is Michael and I'm an addict is no longer part of my vocabulary. I'm ready to take on with the next version of myself.
Yeah.
And then saying, I am Michael and I am working to be the best possible health I can be in is different than saying, my name is Michael and I'm an overeater. It has a different energy, has a different synergy. It says to the universe what I'm aiming for rather than where I don't want to go. So it's one of those things of that's where I want to play. And I'm willing to make that discernment. If you are in the first stages of a 12-step program, congratulations. I'm so glad that you started there and that you're working on that. Please work the program. It has some amazing effects. It can get you really far. And when you are ready to graduate from that, please find a life coach, find a mentor, find another practice that can take you the next leg. We're now in chapter 4 or 5 of your life. For me, a 12-step program is chapter 2 or 3. And maybe that's a really long chapter in your life. It could be 10 years, it could be 50 years, like your uncles that you said were alcoholics most of their life.
They died from alcoholism.
Right. So they struggle with being an addict most of their life. And I know other people who similarly, they identify with that as part of their identity. Okay, does that serve you for where you want to go? And if it does, awesome, congratulations, you found an identity trait that you want to have. If you don't, find a way to rewrite the program. And one of the biggest ways to do that is to start suggesting to yourself that you are different than that. This is where I'm going, not this is where I'm stuck. That's the victim consciousness. I am stuck here.
I like the way you mentioned, Michael. I like the way you spoke right now this second time. I understood better what you wanted to say. Yes, I agree with that. I do think that in some cases, like it might be in every case, alcoholism is something that has a bigger repercussions. Yet I think that everything that we do in our lives that is negative or detrimental, that it's necessary to recognize the shadow, recognize the dark part, the part that doesn't please you. Shed light, like you say, like my mission is shed light into the dark corners, shed the light. And some shadows of ourselves that we created, manifested, that were imposed on us, I don't know, they need like a 12-step program. I think that it's an early stage. Oh, before, and if you understand self-suggestion it's going to help you a lot into this journey. Yes, I think that it's necessary to recognize that you learn how to deal with that shadow on yourself. Then it's a process of taking a look into what we are going to say, like developing the best of yourself and things like that. Because it's not that it's inaccessible. It's just, it's like you said, Michael, it's early stages. It's the same thing I was saying before there. Like I recognize that in my journey, there was a necessity to have faith, to recognize that life doesn't need to be so dark. Life doesn't need to be so sad. Life doesn't need to be so meaningless. So let's have faith. And in that faith, I started looking for better opportunities, for better meanings. And I didn't understand. If I understood what I knew today, it would be easier, but it's incompatible. It's not the same person. The person that understand what I understand today would not be in depression, would not be so sad, so meaningless, so without purpose. That's what I'm trying to put together. I don't know if I'm being clear, but, and how do we speak to this person? Like perhaps you are in this stage hearing right now. How do we speak to this person? Oh, we talk about re-empower yourself. Focus on the positive. And I think that in my experience, Michael, what could help this idea of identifying that you mentioned is very key, because the moment that you get over, no matter what, get over identifying with the negative, it's the moment that you open yourself to be able to identify with the positive. It makes sense to you, Michael? Do you have anything to add about this specifically?
So I do, and I think that we're going to be probably covering that in our next podcast when we talk about the shadow, because this idea of addiction, this idea of identities that don't work with us does have a lot to do with shadow work. And I've dipped my toe in that pond, and there's still plenty to do. But I think that we really wanted to talk about this power of suggestion because it does lead us to there. So being aware of something, identifying it, and then flipping the script, for me, that's actually where I think one of my superpowers is. That's one of my gifts, is being able to see something from a different perspective, shifting it from, like we said, I'm forgetful to I'm working on my memory. It's a slightly different words, but they have a different connotative meaning. They have a different vibration. There's a different energy for it. And when saying it differently, you get a different outcome. So that's why we wanted to start with the power of suggestion first, is let's be suggesting the things that are going to be powerful for us, so then we can actually lead ourselves to the goals that we say that we want. So it is this idea of getting to that space. And some of the things that I've listened to recently, this is primarily, I think, on Clubhouse, where I hear people talking about it, is this idea of toxic positivity. And I get it. Anything can be toxic in too high a quantity. If you are always seeing the good and you're never willing to acknowledge the bad, then there's a potential that it can bite you, for sure, that it can actually have a negative impact because you don't prepare for it. So I totally get that. I'm not talking about heading into spiritual bypassing either. It's another term I've heard around the same idea of, I'm just not going to experience the pain because it's not necessary for me to. I'm just going to bypass that lesson to get to the other side. I'm also not in support of doing that either. It's more a matter of being aware of and setting your goal of where you want to go, and then start taking the step to get there. Being prepared for what can distract you, for sure, what can knock you off course, for sure. And even, I think Jim Quick talks about this, as well as John Butcher talks about this, is this idea of what our habits are can be some of this thing that we're suggesting. If we're constantly thinking about, I need to make sure I drink enough water for the day, that's actually a suggestion to myself of water is important. So I need to keep water around for me. So those habits, those are also good. Your to-do list. But Jim Quick and John Butcher also talk about the don't do list, the things that are on the no-no list, the distractions that you will not tolerate. As an example, for me, I have not taken any illegal drugs. That's a no-no for me. I'm not interested. It's not part of my character. It's not something that I go out and seek. There are some people that do. This is not me making a value judgment on you. This is a no-no for me. I'm not putting it in my body. I want to keep what brain cells I have working to the highest level of efficiency that I possibly can. That's my purpose on why that's not okay for me. And each of us needs to know what is outside our boundaries, yes. But I still want to look at what's on this side of the boundary, what's possible, rather than what's now impossible. Because there's so much in this world right now that I know I'll never set foot on. Me personally, I will never set foot on every square foot of land that's on this planet. I don't have enough time in my lifetime to do it. The same thing is true for every concept that's out there. I don't have enough time to be a master and a specialist in every concept out there. So I'm going to choose on what I can specialize in. I'm going to drill my deep wells on the things that I want to do, rather than being concerned and worried about all the things that I can't. And I do that by saying, this is going to get me here. I'm valuing my time investing in here because it's going to get me to this end result. And that may be the journey through it as the person I become while I'm learning it. And it may be that I can accomplish something whenever I'm done. And knowing that, and that's the groundwork that I personally lay down on why I'm doing the things that I'm doing this podcast, because it allows me to hone my message. It allows me to reach more people. It allows me to learn how to do this YouTube thing and potentially publishing this to a podcast at some point. There's a reason, an intentionality on why I'm taking these steps, rather than wandering around at the whim of the suggestion of things that are outside of me.
And I think that this intentionality, it's something that it greatly influences our be understanding it, but before I had completely no idea of that. When we do a ayahuasca session in the place where I do it, there is a guide, spiritual guide there. We do it as a ceremony. And one of the first things that we do is that he tells everybody what his intention there. And then he asks every person that is attending the ceremony to tell, what is your intention here? And this is something that I realize in many other circumstances, Michael. For example, if you are hypnotizing someone, you tell them the intention that you want to have to produce, so their subconscious mind gets focused onto that. When you are guiding a meditation with this basically hypnosis, you are also setting an intention to relax, to reflect on this, reflect on that. There is an intention there. Other places, when you are doing dream work, you go to sleep and you say, hey, I am going to sleep. I am resting my physical body and I will be reflecting on this and that. And now this opens the door to what I think might be the most useful part of this conversation, which is how do we actually, when we have this leap of faith, once we do this leap of faith, we understand, okay, I can work with my subconscious mind. I can take out the focus from the negative. I can focus on the positive. I can set a purpose, set a vision for who I want to be, decide who is my best, and then work towards it. And this is not a conscious work. That's the point. This is not a conscious work. This is a subconscious work, because our consciousness doesn't work on ourselves. Our consciousness, it just focuses on survival. It's just analyzing the environment and saying, hey, what's out there that can kill me? That's why we focus so much on the negative. So working and transforming ourselves is actually subconscious work. So how do we do that? How do we do that? And the first, more important, Michael mentioned affirmation. The more important thing I do believe that comes is symbolism. Before affirmations, it's symbolism. That's why we spoke about the shadow, and we will talk about the shadow next episode. And we are talking about this negative thing. It's like the symbolism. Our minds just understand symbols. It understands red. Red is blood. It understands that. It understands fire, yellow, the heat, all those things like pain, pleasure. That's what it understands. And because we are humans and we have this ability to communicate, we have symbols that are words are deeply entangled with symbols in our minds. So if I say danger, then I have a feeling of danger. I don't have a personification, a materialization of that danger, but the moment that I say danger, I do have some sign. For example, people do teach for others that are in dangerous situations. Instead of asking for help, saying fire. The symbol, it's the symbol. Like when you ask for help, people will not connect with taking action and things like that. But when you say fire and people visualize fire, they visualize danger, they visualize that they need to do something, so they might take an action. So it's all about symbols. Words are just symbols. So the most important thing that I would mention on how to talk, because it's just a conversation, guys. I know you might feel a bit confused. How do you use it? It's conversation. Talk about symbols. And having this conversation in symbols, that's what we mean. Don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive. Do you have something to say, Michael, like to mention here about this? Because Yeah, I can branch that out, but I know that you have some things that you would add yourself.
So here's the one thing we need to be aware of is the way that we've defined it in current psychology that I'm aware of is the left side of our brain works in symbolism. The right side works in concepts, and it does process things differently. So when someone has an injury on the left side of their brain, they have difficulty with things like words and symbols, versus someone who has an injury on the right side of the brain, they have trouble with concepts. They have trouble with the aesthetic idea. So it's more in some ways the overarching concepts. In fact, one of the books that I had as a textbook in college was drawing on the right side of the brain, because then you're not just, if I think of an eye, I'm not drawing what the icon in my head is of an eye, which people who you are right-handed tend to actually, when they first start drawing things, they're drawing in the symbols. So, okay, here's this and a circle for the iris. Versus if I'm going to draw what I see, if I see an eyeball in front of me and I draw the lines and the contours and I draw what I see, I'm using a different part of my brain. I'm not talking symbols anymore when I'm using those other aesthetic styles of things on the right side of the brain. Symbolism is very important. It's how we connect with other people. It's how we actually get a link to those bigger concepts. Is I can say this word, it'll have this meaning. But there's this other, once again, there's a layer underneath this. As you said, fire has a different level of danger when it is a possibility where you're at, where there's fire. But if you were to back up 10,000 years, tiger may have been the danger symbol, because you're much more likely to die from a tiger hunting you down and eating you than you are from a fire burning down your house, because your house is made of mud. You don't care as much about fire. So it is the meanings we put on those symbols that's so important. And in the different languages across the planet, and even in the same language in different parts of a country, or even different parts of the world using that same language. We're talking in English here. The Queen's English versus Australian English versus Northern American English and Southern American English. You say a word, it'll have a different connotation. So symbolism is tough to cover, because if I say dog, you have a concept in your mind about what a dog is about. And if you had a puppy growing up and your parents took it away from you, the symbolism you have is for dog equals loss. If you got attacked by a dog when you were a kid, dog equals danger. But if you had a dog who went to sleep with you every night and kept you warm, dog equals comfort. So we need to be careful about telling people what their symbols are, because we
But
will.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. Like even in the they are like, when you see something, if you see something, because sometimes you might have some hallucination, do not talk to other people, ask for explanations, like things like that. And that's exactly what you're talking about, because my symbols are different from Michael's symbols. So I need to understand my symbols. I need to be mindful of my symbolism. There is a level of comprehension, self-understanding, mindfulness in order to do that. Because if we are talking about the mind self-suggesting something that will change our minds and thus change who we are talking about transmutation. So if I want to transmute, not transmutation, transcendency, sorry, I always confuse those both. So if I want to transcend who I am, it's better for me to understand who I am. How can I transcend if I do not understand who I am? So it's necessary to have a deep work of understanding for us to understand our symbolism. And sometimes the symbols, they will appear, they will show up, and then we don't understand what it means. Like we have a dream, we are having the same dream, and we don't understand. Usually we are supposed to understand those things. If we are not understanding, maybe that information is in a dark corner that we need to shed light upon. And not shedding light upon that corner is what's keeping us from moving forward.
Absolutely. And even Charlie Morley, who actually teaches about dreaming and lucid dreaming, and shadow work on top of that as well, talks a lot about the idea of symbolism. Is if there is a dream dictionary out there that you find, it's not necessarily going to track with what your meaning of that symbol is. It's what their meaning of that symbol is when it shows up in your dreams. It's when you're looking at your shadow, once again, dog could be my shadow or it could be my light, depending on my experience and what meaning I've applied to it. We seem to be talking a lot about shadow today, so we'll certainly dig into that next week quite a bit more. But
Yeah.
it's this
That
layer of understanding what your symbols mean to you, and sometimes you may need help into unraveling what those mean. If it is therapy, a psychotherapist, a hypnotherapist, maybe it is necessary to get a little bit of extra help so that they can help you discover what it is if it is challenging and confusing for you. Or meditation, mindfulness practices, tapping, havening. There's other tools that can actually help us get there. And to then, so once we have this symbolism, like you're talking about, which is where we're going with this, is once you've figured out what triggers, what symbols trigger what response, it's then a matter of using those to get the response that you want rather than being at the whim of whenever they come up. And it is a matter of then repeating those things on a regular basis. If you wake up every morning and saying, I'm a lazy, screwed up mess, that's going to set the tone for your day. If you're going to say, I'm growing as a person in my wealth and my abundance and in my ability to serve, you're going to show up differently in the world. So each of those has this opportunity to come reach you forward, and maybe making a proclamation of, I am growing every day, which is a truth. I am growing every day because I'm gaining new experiences. And it reaffirms then who I want to be, and then moving forward. So now that you had a couple of other things you wanted to talk about as far as what helps.
So I do agree with the repetition and the affirmations. You mentioned them as proclamations. I like to say enchantments. Like when I have a tag into my Notion journal that has enchantment on it. Because why do I say enchantment? Because it's like I'm enchanting myself. I like to use this word. It's an enchantment. It's I'm spelling myself. Hey, be this. I know you are not this yet. Be this. Like just be. Go out there. How do I do this? I don't know. Do. Figure it out. But just decide that you are this. Decide that you are this person and go after it. Do your best. If you fail, it's okay. You will find a way to have the results that you intend to. And if you don't, perhaps it's a matter of reimagining this situation, this vision. Perhaps that is not exactly. So let's see, based on the failures that you have, the exposure that you had, what is possible and how we can reframe all those things. Because affirmation is very good. And that's why it ties back to symbolism, because when, again, Michael spoke about that, when I'm mentioning that I'm negative things, that's when I say even if I say I'm not an angry person, something like that, but the mind doesn't understand the not. No is not a word that the mind understand, can't. It doesn't understand. When I say I am not aggressive, what's the symbol that is communicated to my subconscious mind? I'm putting I and aggressive together. And that's what some coaches, they try to say. And I know this, all this conversation to details, it's uninteresting and people might not have patience to go through it. But if we just get here, like other coaches do, and say, hey, focus on the positive, it's not going to be comprehended by the person that is back down there in the beginning of the journey. But when I say, hey, when you speak about the negative, if you are complaining, if you are putting nose into things, denying, like limiting, your mind just gets the symbols that we are using and just identify ourselves with that, because it's, oh, those symbols are in my reality. I need to adapt to live into this reality with those symbols, scarcity, angry, addiction, things like that. But when we understand, because that is, as we said before, this is a complex thing. As we understand what is our scenario, our culturescape, what is us, our shadow, everything, and we recognize that, once we learn how to deal with that, and then we move forward, is a matter of focusing on the positive symbols, because we only move towards pleasure or away from pain, and these are all symbols. Focus on the positive symbols to drive yourself to there. Reaffirm yourself, enchant yourself. What is the word? Proclamation. Do the affirmation thing. Repeat those affirmations, and repeat those affirmations. And then another thing that may greatly help us, that I hinted just right now, is something called object permanence. We have an ability in our minds that it's something that was developed throughout many years of evolution of consciousness. And there is even a video on the consciousness from Kurzgesagt that we can link on the description. I'll link 2 videos I know. The Power of Suggestion, we probably linked that video a lot in the past. And this consciousness from Kurzgesagt. And here's the thing, animals, conscious beings, we learn how to keep an object in our minds that is not actually in our immediate perception. Let's say that we are hunting food. We are hunting a deer, and this deer just hides behind the trees. We have enough consciousness, this is called object permanence, to understand the deer went hiding behind the trees. The deer didn't disappear. It's not in our immediate perception, but we have the consciousness that the deer continues to exist in order for us to continue pursuing the deer until we reject permanence. And this is extremely important into the subconscious work of mind. And that's where life vision gets in, Michael. When we do the exercise like 3MIQ and the life book, because then we create the vision board. Anybody that is in self-development has heard of vision boards. And then we create.
It seems we've lost Bruno again. And what I wanted to talk about is this idea of object permanence. Is being a bit of the contrarian for this particular episode, because there is this concept, a thought experiment called Schrodinger's cat. And this is the idea that if you put a cat in a box, you don't know if it's there or not if you cannot visualize it and observe it. That at any one point in time, it's a 50-50 chance on whether the cat is still there. And this thought experiment, it really goes around the idea of subatomic particles that are there sometimes when we're observing them, and sometimes they're not. So this idea of object permanence and quantum mechanics actually are in conflict. We have this ability to know that something is there and that something may disappear at any moment. So it's funny that you brought forth this idea of that if there's a deer goes behind a bush, that it is still there, but we're learning that unless it's observed, it is there and it's not at the same time. So Schrodinger's cat is this wonderful thought experiment around that. And just to keep that in mind, yes, we can actually maintain that consciousness, that progression of that something going from here to there, and it will potentially come out on the other side or still be hiding in that space. But it's one of those assumptions that we're making, that we're for sure that it's there when it may or may not be. So I like that idea from the power of suggestion of that. Of course it's there, but is that an assumption?
Can you tell me where exactly I stopped?
I was right about the time that you said object permanence, the deer goes behind the bush, and then it stopped.
It was okay. So let me just wrap on that, because that's like interesting. So we have this object permanence in our minds that when the deer disappears behind the bush, we can go there and we know that it's there and we can continue pursuing it. And this is the pursuit towards pleasure, the avoidance of pain. It brings us to that. This is a very important tool. Everybody that is on personal development And this is the thing of vision boards. We use object permanence to that. When we set up that vision, this is exactly what we do with the 3MIQ and with the Lifebook process. Those are other tools that help us to create a vision to pursue. And the Lifebook process creates this very detailed vision. It's a very clear object that we can then keep it in our minds. And we do the same process as, oh, there is a crab here hidden under the sand. Let's dig and find it. There is a bunny hidden into this hole. Let's dig it and find it. Oh, that is my vision. It's there. I cannot access it right now. It's not in my immediate perception, but we can run after it. We can pursue it. And that's what happens when we say that that's what happens when we say create a vision that attracts you, that fuels you and attracts you, because we are using this object permanence and this pursuit towards pleasure. We are setting this purpose to our subconscious mind. Hey, here is the object that I'm looking for, and I'm in pursuit of it. And then our subconscious mind go after it. Does it still fit the observation that you did in the end, Michael?
Yes, it does. So because the Schrodinger's cat idea is that we imagine it. So I like the fact that you brought the imagination in there. And yes, the Lifebook process, the 3 most important questions, all that stuff does leverage that capability of our brain to start moving towards it. If it is just on the other side of this hill, of course I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to give up because I know that it's on the other side of this hill. But is it? So we just need to keep. I'm playing the contrarian, I think, today on the podcast, is that there is schools of thought that are counter to this. And it's a bigger awareness because both are true, but partial.
And I have a question around that. Here comes the thing that we spoke about. Reality doesn't matter. Reality doesn't matter. And I know that this is a very affirmation that can incite a lot of controversy, but come with me for a second and let's thread on why reality doesn't matter. We already spoke about like the beings that survive are not the beings that better perceive reality the way it is, or the beings that perceive reality in a way that helps them continue alive. Our perception of reality, that's exactly what you meant, might be totally distorted. Is it true? Is it not? Is it there? Is it not? Does it need someone observing it to be there? And that even taps into the simulation hypothesis that we are in a simulation. And I do believe that we should look at the word like that, because I do realize that if I do not have conscious of something, I just don't have access. It's, let's suppose I am in a simulation. If I don't know about blockchain technology, it's just not available to me. So that's the thing about, do I observe? If I observe, it exists. If I do not observe, it doesn't exist. But here's the thing about all that. If I use object permanence, the deer might exist, might not exist because I'm observing it or not. But what I want to focus is the effect of the object permanence has on me, because now it drives me to pursue until I find the deer again. And it might just come back into existence when I find it. That became very quantum, like very inaccessible conversation. But I do believe that, I hope that people that hear this, if you have a question, if you don't understand what I meant to say right now, just leave a comment. What do you mean the deer comes into existence? But I believe you were clear on your example, what you meant to say, like it's a thing on quantum physics, a theory. So even if the deer just comes back into existence the moment that I find it again, this is the ability that allow me to bring it back into existence. And for me, it just came into existence when it came back into my immediate perception. But here's the thing, you mentioned imagination. That's exactly what imagination is. And this is imagination shaping reality. Like I can just create something that I imagine. I can just use things that I'm familiar with. I can use only things that I am familiar with. I can only have access to resources that I am aware exist and can be used. If I am not aware, I don't have access to them. So I need to have imagination. I need to exercise this imagination and I need to envision things. And then because I envision them in my head, I can pursue them. And this all interferes into this work of self-suggestion. Having a purpose, setting up the purpose, understanding that your mind just works in symbolism, just understands symbolism, doing the affirmations, identifying with the thing that, with the symbols that you wish to have. Like I was mentioned before, I put a note here and I forget, like have cornerstones, have values that even in moments of confusion, you have those cornerstones that define who you are. And those are symbols that you greatly identify with. And then in moments of confusion, decisions like adrenaline, you just have those cornerstones there to make sure that you are true to yourself, that you are authentic. Are there any other mechanisms that you think are important, Michael, into this self-suggestion work?
So I think that there's this other phase too, and I know that it's something we kicked around a little bit in the past, is, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is where you get your information from can have an impact as well. So it's that idea of surrounding yourself with people that are going to support you in getting where you want to go. So your community has a huge aspect of this. Is if you are surrounding yourself with negative people who are always putting you down, you're going to continuously put yourself down. So the question then is, which is the trigger and which is the cause and which is the effect? And it really doesn't matter because the overall process is still going to be that you're going to be more in a negative space. So if that's where you want to be, and that's where you feel the most comfortable, congratulations, you found it. If it's not, something needs to change there. Something needs to shift for that opportunity for you to grow in a different way to be possible. And that may be by finding another community that's more in resonance with who you believe you are and where you want to go and why you want to go there. It really is a matter of finding the supportive community for where you're going. If you are a polyamorous person, being around people who believe in monogamy, all you're going to feel is criticized. And vice versa.
A lot of struggle.
It's a lot of struggle and it's a lot of dissonance and a lot of challenge. And instead, you almost start talking yourself out of that concept. Now, I'm not saying that either one is the best way to go. It depends on the person. For some people, it works perfectly well in one. In other cases, it works perfectly well the other way. Same thing is true for pretty much all of these conflicting perspectives and views. You know, someone who is a liberal versus a conservative, if they're actually Christian or not Christian, if they are Islamic or Jewish, if they, all of these are in conflict. And my thing is that find the thing that resonates with you and put yourself in a community that's going to help you get there. I personally am in a community of personal development focused people because that's the kind of person I believe I am and what I want to be more of. I'm also a life coach, so I'm connected with quite a few other life coaches who are growing their business, and some are doing really well and some are struggling, and all of us are doing our best to help change the world by one conversation at a time, because that's where I want to be. So in order to leverage and to take advantage of this many human beings on the planet of being suggestible, ensure that the suggestions that are coming are in your best interest, are inviting you to the direction you want to head. Because I think that, and if you are in a community that's not, change it. You have the choice to make that shift and that change. And I'm hoping you feel empowered
And
to do it.
something that I remember, and we even spoke that into the past, in past episodes, is like the community is not just your peers and things like that. It's like we tend to set, when we set the purpose, set objectives, and we connect those objectives that we wish to pursue to other individuals in our community, the closer they are to us, more that motivates us, because we tend to forget that we are a single cell from our mothers that was vacuumated, I believe that's the word, and then it developed into this entire being that is here, me, Michael, you. And we are just the continuation of a single organism that is humanity. Humanity is a single organism that reproduced and got a hold on Earth and is just so present on Earth right now. And I say right now, I don't want to go too deep into that, but yeah, it's a momentary thing. We hope that we have evolved enough to perdure, but we are not necessary here. And that's the thing. We are not necessary to the life on Earth. We are just one organism. And here's the thing: our subconscious mind knows that. It knows it. We have memories from our parents, our grandparents. Symbolisms, like those symbolism dictionary that you mentioned, they do work somehow, because we have symbols that are from so many past generations that they might be the same for all of us, despite the fact that we do have our personal individual symbols to certain things. But we are this organism that comes so much before that. And when we talk with our subconscious mind, here is the goal. And the goal involves much more than me personally, this being right here. Our subconscious mind tend to work much more, much harder. And it might be, we just don't know. We talked about quantum physics, so why not mention that? It might be that we do have some connection as humanity, as our peers, as the people that are around us, that we just don't understand. And we are influenced by this connection. So we get into this vibe of productivity or not productivity, of the person that is polyamorous in a community of monogamous people. They will feel things that are beyond comprehension on how they should probably not behave that way. And it might, as I say, compel them into changing who they identify with. And that is not just a logical thing, that is much more to that. And there might be things that we just don't understand that are at work here. So when we set an objective to our community, and when we tie that the outcome of that objective to our community, it is a great work in our subconscious mind. And just to wrap this up, to make it more useful information, it's, let's say that I want to make more money. I want to double my income. I make $2,000. I want to make $4,000. And then I say, how do I train my Q basic stuff? How do I grow in order to do that? Oh, I could do this and that. And then I'm setting up the plan. And when I get there, I can say, how will other people will be benefited from this? And I can say, oh, I'll be able to go in a travel with my significant other. I'll be able to provide this and that for my mother, for my sister, for a brother that I might have, another parent, something like that. And just connecting, learning how to do this process of connecting the experiences we want with the growth that we need to have, and how this growth will impact other people. This is subconscious mind work. We were working with our subconscious mind and giving it the tools, because it requires tools, guys. It's not us that we are creating these processes. It's evolution. Like, we went to hunting because there was an object that was not in our immediate perception that we needed, and we went in pursuit towards it. And we went hunting because that would benefit not only us, but our entire family that was back there waiting, our wives, our children. So this is not new thing that we are creating. We are just understanding how the human works and giving what is necessary for our own self go after it, because it's, again, not a conscious process, it's a subconscious process. And I think that there's something for you to mention as well, Michael, that I just remember, which is something that is one of your coaching pillars. And that's why I think that you are the right person to bring that up. What about celebration? How does celebration impact the subconscious work, setting a goal, going after it, and then doing that again?
Yes, so celebration is certainly one of those key things, and it's going back to what Michael Bernard Beckwith talks about of the Satori moments or the Kensho moments. Kensho being the pain that we're avoiding, and Satori being the pleasurable moments that we're moving towards. And celebration is the idea of focusing on those pleasurable moments. You getting that dopamine hit because you've completed that task, you checked that box, you had that connection, you got a smile from someone else. It is those things that we need to acknowledge and celebrate. And it does train once again our brain of, oh, I got dopamine when I did that thing. Let's find more ways to do that thing so I can get more dopamine because that felt freaking amazing. So celebration is one way that we do that. And I know quite a few people who struggle with this idea of celebration because life needs to be a struggle. And if I celebrated, then I wouldn't be struggling enough. And that may work for you. But if it's not, maybe you are, if the struggle is important, if things being hard, maybe you are motivated more by those Kensho experiences, that hitting rock bottom, actually getting the hard lesson of having to learn it through grit, having to learn it through failure after failure. Maybe that's what motivates you. And for other people, it's these Satori moments, these moments whenever we are celebrating, if it is something that you did positively at work or an experience with a loved one, and just acknowledging the fact that this is a great moment and saying, yes, I'm happy while I'm doing this. That is really all the celebration that it needs to be, is acknowledging that I'm really happy whenever I do this. That's what I'm asking about. And on the Kensho moments, maybe it is being aware of, look at what I just went through to get here. And I haven't come this far to only come this far. But I had a conversation a few months ago with a friend who basically laid out is that unless it's a hard lesson I don't remember, and I am happy to allow him to keep that belief. I challenged it at the time, but that's what motivates him. I'm at a point in my life now where I've created enough hard moments, enough Kensho moments in my life that I want to listen to the Satori moments and enjoy the process as I'm getting there. Doesn't mean I'm not willing to do the hard work to get there. I'm willing to push through the pain in order to get there. I got it. But if I can be working towards the pleasure to celebrate the win at the end, I'm gonna be listening for that insight, that intuition, that bump, that serendipitous moment to enjoy those experiences rather than hitting rock bottom again, because rock bottom sucked, and I don't like the suck of that. So,
and it's just a decision, right? It's just a decision. It's an affirmation. How nice of an affirmation. Clearly an affirmation. If it's not a hard lesson, I will not remember. Something like that. Very affirmation, clearly. And then we can have in the other side a different affirmation. You know what? I suffered enough. I heard that before, Michael, and I greatly identify with that. That's something that I sometimes remember myself when there is the opportunity to suffer. Instead of suffering, I do recognize as just the opportunity to suffer. I see the door there clearly in front of me. And I look at the door and I say, I suffered enough. And I just close it and go to other way. Suffered enough. Let's do other things right now because we can do that. We can linger here, but we can let's do other things.
So one of the things that comes to mind is a quote from the book or the movie Fantastic Beasts, and Newt gets called out because he doesn't worry by a Muggle, and Newt's, why suffer twice? Why worry about the thing and then do the thing and actually suffer with it again? Why not just experience it, go into it? Anxiety doesn't serve you in that case. So I always kind of remember that quote of why suffer twice for that one thing. And we have this tendency to, like we started out with, to re-traumatize ourselves around these things. And just to wrap up is, if this is a challenge for you, if this is something where laying down the power of suggestion for where you want to go as a challenge, please ask for help. If it is actually with your friends, if it's with a psychotherapist, a life coach, someone who can help you reframe this. Because as Bruno just said, I think that all of us have suffered enough. Let's flip the script on this and get help to do that. I'm happy to help you with that. It's part of what I do as a life coach. I don't need to be the one who does it. Please get help around this, because yes, some of us really want to be independent and say we did it on our own. But even the conversation I had earlier with one of my clients this week is, if you haven't ever seen it done, how can you actually take the steps to do it? And it may not be the whole thing, but get some help from someone who's already been there, a mentor, a teacher, a coach, something to actually help you get over that hurdle. Someone who's overcome this before, who can give you the tips on how to get there. Because this is such a powerful tool to give yourself that auto suggestion to help move you forward, and maybe the opportunity to unblock you from where you are now and let go of the struggle and instead celebrate the wins.
Yeah, and you can either figure it out with friends, you can ask for specialized help. As we mentioned before, that is something that we defined right in the beginning of the podcast, is if you are struggling with resignifying your past, if you have trauma, and there are unresolved things in your past, like, for example, as we mentioned, alcoholism, or just trauma, anxiety, things like that, it's better to look for a therapist that will help you to re-signify this. There are processes in place. I do know some of those processes. Michael does know them. Can you do that with a coach? Yes, you can. But it's much better a person that is focused on dealing with the past. If you can get a therapist that is involved into coaching, like a spiritual guide, like Teal Swan, for example, perfect. She'll help you fix your problems. It's a work that you do, but she will look at you. And in the moment that we start to mention things, she'll recognize what is the pattern that we are, what is the process that we need to take, and she'll have the tools to, let's fix it. I do believe that it would be highly expensive though, because Teal Swan is a world-renowned spiritual leader, but someone like her. And I do understand that it's very hard, because there is a lot of people that they say they can take you to this work and you don't know who you're trusting. But the key here is, why, like Michael said, does that person really manifests? It's not talking, it's manifesting. Does that person manifest into their lives the thing that I'm struggling to manifest myself, to experience myself? Do I wish for money? Is that person wealthy? Do I wish for more time free? Does that person has free time? Do I wish to be happier? Is that person happy? Is he joyful? Are they joyful? And you can have several mentors, several leaders, several conversations with several people. You might just be a person that when you face somebody that has something that you admire, you just go there, meet that person and talk to them and try to understand how they are the way they are. And that will help you. But that requires a lot of autonomy and consciousness already. So if you are struggling back there with the conscious side of things, you know, you don't see the buttons to press. So if it is related to a trauma, go back, talk to a therapist. And at some point when you are feeling more safe around that subject, you feel more healed and you're ready to embark into a journey for your future, for the vision for the future, to set goals and be productive and get there. That's more like the time to get a coach, because you are healed, your legs are fine, you have energy, you might have some things, some baggage there, but you are enough to survive the journey. And then you go there, you talk to a coach and he can help you. Because here's the thing, we are talking all this information here, and so there are so many people that they are not yet aware, they're just getting to know all those informations. And if you figure it out on your own, you can. If you figure it out with your friends, you can. But actually having someone that has the tools necessary and knows the tools that you need Michael identifies himself as a life book outfitter, someone that can help you in your journey, that can give you the tools, that knows the path, that knows the map. That's a very valuable person if you wish to increase your chances of success and decrease the time and the effort that is going to be necessary for the journey, for your journey.
So that last part, I think, is the key point, is, and this is where mentors, this is where coaches, this is where people who've actually gone through some of this work adds value, is yes, you could probably get there on your own. But if you can read the autobiography of Albert Einstein on how he got to his theories, not just what he did, but how he got there, how much would that spring you forward in the way that you can think? Not that I'm anywhere close to as brilliant or a genius as Albert Einstein. What I'm getting at is that if you can work with someone to help you take a quantum leap, a quantum shift from where you are to where you're going to go, what is that worth to you? Yes, you could probably talk with your friends, and they may actually be really insightful people and ask the questions that are going to get you to the answers that you want to do. But in the same fashion of, if I want to, have somebody work on my home, I'd much rather have somebody who does it professionally rather than somebody that dabbles with it every once in a while on the weekend, because then I know it's going to be done to a high standard. It's going to be done with a level of professionalism, and there's going to be ownership around what is actually shared in a session like that. Same thing is true for a therapist. They actually own their results. They do this professionally. It's something that they take a lot of pride in. And the ones that I've actually worked with have been absolutely outstanding. So finding someone who can help you and assist you on that process of discovering this truth for yourself so that you can have the right tools available to you to suggest yourself into the next version of yourself, and thereby elevating your best. That's our goal here, is to plant a seed, to open a door to opportunity, to throw a map on the table and say, which peak are we going to go to next? And then outfit you to get there. And then let's start climbing. And with that, I want to wrap up. Thank you, Bruno, again for your time. This is the Elevate Your Best podcast, and my name is Michael Danklefs.
Thank you as well, Michael. I love this conversation. And my name is Bruno Martins. I hope you guys that are watching, not you guys, I hope that you all that are watching had a nice time as well. I know that sometimes I felt a little confused. There are so many pieces to put together and lay the foundation to talk about this in a way that everybody can understand. But if you have any questions, go down there, ask in the comments. And if you are here still, please hit the like button, subscribe, and activate the notification bell so you are notified when we are having these important conversations here and all the topics that we are approaching. So thank you guys. Bye-bye. Bye, Michael, and see you later.
Bye now, and see you next week.